So I'm going to do a quick impromptu video on my Predator 3500 generator. I had to bring this thing home because it quit running on me, and thank goodness I had a backup generator. You're going to see some parts taken out, but what I didn't have was firing at the spark plug. So I found out that this little igniter right here was the problem. It was either going to be that or a coil that follows this wire way back up underneath there. There's a guy that's got a 4-hour video on that. But my problem and concern was, sorry for the movement here, wasn't prepared, was what caused this thing to go bad. Because when I look at the old one, the capacitor's not blown, there's no water, no oil sitting on it. A lot of people talk about that. But what I noticed is one of those plugs right there, it's really hard to see, has a lot of oil on it. When I say plug, doing this with one hand right here. But when I follow this oil safety switch, this whole thing is coated in oil. This connector's coated in oil. And if I take this connector off the new one, and I've verified it runs, look at that. So that connector, in my assumption, has allowed oil to drip off this safety switch, the oil safety switch, and this whole little butt connector here is full of it, or whatever you want to call it, is full of oil. And you can, it's crazy. But I'm thinking what happened is oil was allowed to basically just trickle down this wire over time. And you can see that plug, it is definitely dirty, it's full of oil. And that oil crossed over somewhere in here, pulled up into that plug, and caused my issue to wipe out this igniter. Now, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to get into my modifications, what I'm doing to this thing. Modification 1, I'm going to remove this. I only put it in there temporarily to see if it's going to work, but I'm going to find a way to mount this higher. 2 reasons. I don't get water in here, I don't get oil in here, debris sitting on top of this circuit board. I'm going to mount it upside down, up here a little higher in the chassis. When I do that, I'm going to allow for a drip for that wire, because it's going to be coming up to where any wire or any oil coming out of there is going to follow that wire, drip off. It cannot go up against gravity. Now, I don't know if I have a bad oil pressure switch or not, because I'll be honest, when I took this thing off, half of these screws weren't put in. This thing did fall out of the back of a truck, but the screws vibrated loose, things like that. They're sitting down here in the tray. Both of them together, so that tells me somebody didn't put this thing together when I bought it. Harbor Freight, you get what you pay for. So you Honda generator lovers can laugh. So that's problem number 1. Now, so that's going to be upgrade mod number 1, is we're going to get that igniter and we're going to mount it up here somewhere to where it does not cause me issues. Number 2 is, I'm going to pause this. Alright, so pause this, I can take this off. But I turned this plug upside down. A lot of people talk about that because you use a, 15-30R adapter, 30 amp adapter to a 50 amp adapter, which my RV has. It causes the plug to hang upside down. It actually plugs in here and then the cord comes off the top. Causes a lot of stress on this plug. Mine isn't that way because I cut that off and I made my own plug for that, to where I'm basically plugging into this and then I have the 50 amp on the other end. I don't have that with me, it's at the camper. But I'm taking this panel off because there's a couple things I'm going to do here. 1, mod number 2, we turn that upside down. And to do that, you're basically just going to take the screws off of here and the bottom, and the only one I really had to remove was this grounding cable. And you're going to see I moved it from this grounding point up here, right here, down to that one and just doubled it up. It's not a problem. Trust me, your house is double grounded on a lot of points. Some people come in and make these connectors up. You don't have to do that. You may have to loosen up 1 or 2 just to make it more convenient to flip it around. Not a big deal. I am going to put a remote start on this. I'm waiting. There's a guy online that makes a remote start, but I want a 4-channel remote that controls the ESC. And the reason I need to control the ESC is I have a fifth wheel with a huge AC unit. Typically I leave the ESC mode on, but when one of the kids or girlfriend fires up the microwave, power, runs a vacuum cleaner, fires up the AC, it draws a lot on this, and from time to time I've blown the fuse, the circuit breaker here or in the camper. So I want one where I can control the ESC myself. If he doesn't come out with it soon, I'll make it my own. It's not a problem, it's very doable. The other thing I'm going to do is now, mod number 3 was that remote switch, and I wanted to control this ESC, which isn't a problem, it can be done. Kenny at that website is researching that. But when you turn this little dial, mine's removed here so I can get this panel off, from off to start, that gets your choke turned on, but it does two things. It turns this generator on, and it turns the fuel on and choke at the same time. When you put it in run, that turns your choke off, but it allows the fuel to be turned on and electric, or the ability for this thing to run. When you turn this dial into off, what it does, it shuts your fuel off, which I appreciate that. Also grounds out everything, the spark, so the engine comes to a stop. You can see I put a little hole right here, and somewhere I've got a micro switch I'm going to install there. I'm going to let that hang down. But I'm going to put a micro switch in, and get the field of view. I'm going to put that in, and when I do, what that's going to allow me is this little connector here is an open circuit when that dial is turned in the run or start position, and that allows this generator to turn on. But when I put that micro switch in here, what I'm going to be allowed to do then is this dial is not going to control grounding this off to actually turn it off. When I turn the unit off, it's going to starve it for the fuel and empty the carburetor, which I run ethanol gas in this. I'm usually back to my property every 2 weeks. That's not a problem, but I don't want that crap sitting in the bowl of my carburetor. So by putting this little micro switch is going to control the grounding to bring this thing to a ground and force it to turn off. It's going to allow me to turn it to the off position. Fuel gets turned off to the gas tank. This thing will still run, and then it's going to spit and sputter. When it does, it's not going to have very much fuel in the bowl of the carburetor, so that's going to save me from getting it gunked up. And that's going to be a micro switch that gets put in there. I may make an addendum here to this video to show you that. So that's everything going on behind that. The micro switch I'm going to do. So mod number 1, change my igniter. Mod number 2, turn this upside down. Mod number 3 was put a remote start on it, and the guy's got a good video on how to do that. I recommend just buying his. I want to control the ESC, and I'm working with him on that. Mod number 4, if I got my numbers correctly, 1, 2, 3, 4, yes, is that micro switch to where I can actually turn off the rotary dial. And you guys know what it looks like. Hell, it's around here somewhere in my mess. This thing right here. When I turn this thing off, it's going to shut the fuel off, but not kill the engine, and it'll starve it full of fuel. Now, some people may say, well, then why do you need the micro switch? Micro switch is very important. Why I'm going to use it is if something happens, an emergency happens, I am going to come out here, I can hit that micro switch, and it will cause this thing to turn off immediately, at least until it spins down on its own. So that's important. That's a safety feature. You still need that switch on there for that reason. That's why they put it on. If nobody's aware, this little ground right here where my finger's pointing and flopping around, that's not optional. That needs to be hooked up. If you don't have this thing grounded to earth ground, you have what's called a floating ground in your camper or whatever you're running. So your grounds technically aren't going to be as safe as if you ground this out. So that's important. Get that thing grounded. That's not a mod, that's a safety. Mod number 5, there was a big canister here. I removed that. What you have here is when you fill this up too much, above that little bar, it comes down in a fuel line right here. It's actually going to the bottom. It would plug into this stupid little canister, and I'm going to show you. You guys are going to see it when you put it. You take all this apart. It's a canister. It used to sit right there. Your fuel line from the tank, if you overfilled it, would go in, and then this air line would go back. And the idea behind it is if you overspilled fuel, it would get into that charcoal filter and slowly trickle back in and be burned through the engine. But I hear that causes it to run rich, so I basically cap this one off because it's an airline. You can do it or don't do it. That's up to you. But this one, the other one that comes from the fuel tank itself, is just going to run down to the bottom. It'll leak a little bit of fuel. Hope you greenies out there don't mind that, but it is what it is. I'm not going to do this mod, but you could if you're going to do a number 6. This coming off the OHV, the overhead valve cover, there is a line that goes from here, basically this line, goes in and plugs into your air breather. It goes on the filtered air side, and what that does, anybody that knows engines, is we get a lot of smoke buildup in here. It's designed to recycle that smoke back into your engine and be burned off. So it's basically burning oil. Now, it's not a big deal if you run cleaner through your system, your generator. I recommend doing that. I use seafoam in mine, so I'm not too worried about that. But if you really wanted to improve that, you would cap this off, very important, and take this line, run it down to the bottom. I recommend putting a filter in it so you don't get bugs and crap like that coming in. But there's enough pressure in this that it will slowly just, exit that oil down, kind of like an oil catch can that people put on cars if you're familiar with cars. So that's the idea and the principle behind it. I'm not going to do that to this one because I clean the carburetor on this religiously with seafoam. Another mod, so we're getting into 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8, I don't know, you tell me. This isn't because it's beautiful red, it was just cheaper than the silver or black, so I didn't care because I don't see it. It matches the side cover if you want to say that. Oil change on this, done every 24 hours, 25 hours, I think, based on the manual. When you fill it back up, around 20 ounces of oil, or you can carefully just fill it up and it will start to spill out of here. When you see it kind of leveling right here at the opening or just slightly spilling out, that's when it's full. So this thing is designed not to overfill, unless you overfilled it with a bunch of oil and then slam that dipstick in there and tightened it real quick, then you'd be over full with oil. When you are changing oil, 10 millimeter takes this off, pop this little cover down there, little access hole, you're gonna see a flap down there, pop that down so this doesn't fill up with oil. If you do, it's gonna get into your igniter, you're gonna screw that up, hate life. Take that 10 millimeter bolt out, let it start trickling down, catch it with a little pan. See, I got mine up on 2x4s to give me some access underneath here. Take that 10 millimeter bolt out, loosen this completely so it cycles out. You can tilt it forward a little bit. Mine did not take a full 20 ounces. It probably took about 19 and a half, no big deal. So we've got those mods up there. I'm gonna get to one more. And the reason I'm doing this video is it's pretty much all the mods that I've seen, minus adding, bigger fuel tanks and extended fuel tanks and all that. But I wanted to put it all in one video so everybody could have it. Say, dude, if I just want to mod the shit out of this thing, one video, you got it. Back here, there is a flame arrestor that goes in. When this thing has that charcoal filter up there, it tends to run rich, and it will cause this filter right here to get clogged. When I couldn't get this thing running and I started doing research, people said, hey, take that off and see if you can get it to run because this thing gets backed up. I could not see the sun through this little screen right here. I also removed this little wire mesh that goes into that opening there. Keep in mind, you do that, you could get a mouse in there, you could get critters in there, cause you other problems, so do it at your own risk. But I took this flame arrestor off and this other little filter off, so that way I get a lot more exhaust going through there. If your machine isn't running, as I said, this had an igniter problem, there's a couple things you can do. Since I'm doing the video, let's get long-winded, why not? You can disconnect this little cutoff, that's that electric ground, disconnect that. Then you can tell you don't have anything wrong with your wire, test it, see if it fires up, see if you got spark. If not, you can go here. This is your oil low sensor. You can unplug that. Again, everything goes to ground when there's a problem because then it robs this spark plug of its spark that it needs to ignite. You can unplug that. So if you're not getting spark, first thing you want to do is unplug your oil low temperature or low unit sensor. Unplug your cutout here on the front on that little rotary dial thing. Test it, see if you have spark. If you don't, you probably have a bad igniter. If yours is running good, I would look at that igniter, take it apart. It's real easy to do. 2 screws, couple things, pigtails unplug, this little thing unplugs. Clean that connector out. Make sure it's dry as hell before you put it back in and fire it up. That will save you a $60 igniter. And then again, mount it up like on this ledge or something to get it out of there. So if your unit's not running. Now, let's get into spark plugs. Got spark plugs here. A couple different versions out there. Let's move over to the car. What comes in your unit is a torch. Had it in my pocket. It is a torch. You're going to see torch, very cheap. F7 RTC. The problem with this plug, it's not a bad plug. I don't know, if it's platinum, nickel, what it is. You can see it's rusting, so it's not zinc coated. It's not a quality plug in my opinion. You can see how black that is from running rich. So you can imagine what my flame arrestor looked like from the charcoal filter being hooked up. So the torch, F7 RTC. Now, there is a guy online, very reputable, that makes remote starters for this. I have brought it to his attention. I wrote NGK and said, hey, people are telling me, I'm sorry, back up. When I cross-reference this torch online, there's reputable websites that tell me to buy a BPR 7ES is the equivalency. The 7 is a heat range, and that's important. There are people online saying this exact spark plug is the upgraded version. I don't believe that, and NGK doesn't either. I wrote their technicians and I asked them, and they said this spark plug burns 200 degrees hotter. When you're in this machine and it's running out there in the blazing ass sun, has no radiator on it and nothing else to keep it cooled down, 200 degree spark plug is a lot. That machine's going to overheat. It's going to wear your oil out quicker. It's going to cause it to break down quicker. It could burn a hole in your piston because it's just too hot of a spark. Don't do that, especially if you're running this thing lean, not rich, but lean. Less fuel gives you a hotter spark to a certain degree. Now, I could not find a BPR7ES in my neighborhood where I live. So I was going to get a BPR7EIX. BPR7EIX. I think it's EIX. Can't look on my phone because I'm using it. That is the iridium version. Again, do not get the 6 series. That is the temperature range 6. That's too hot. But if you get the BPR7ES is the NGK equivalent for the torch that came out. The BPR7EIX is the iridium version equivalent of the torch that came out. If you want a better spark plug, some people can disagree, they can agree. It's up to you, man. Do what you want to do. The E3-22 is a replacement for the BPR7ES as you see. It also matches the heat range of the BPR6ES. Now I do plan to ask E3, what is your heat range in this so I can do a fair comparison. I don't know that yet. But what does this plug bring to the table? It's going to be hard to see here, but it has a diamond fire technology. I think the cathode is the center, the electrode, I could have it backwards. Don't mock me on this. But it is split, so I think it's supposed to cause a better spark. Now that's all in theory, because you're going to ask E3 which one's the best, because ours is. You ask NGK, ours is. It's all a matter of manufacturer, what they want to do. So there you have the spark plugs. Now, one thing I did, and I'll have to show it in a video, is on this side right here, I ended up cutting a big hole in my cover, and I'm going to show you what I did here. I put a small radiator fan in there because this right here in the front has a 12-volt source. You have to get that goofy little plug there. You can buy it online. Get a couple. They're going. They're not making them anymore, as far as what I heard. Something to do with Europeans, and it matches something too close. But I put a radiator fan in there, and I'm drawing heat out of this unit. And the reason I do that is this sits literally in the blazing ass sun on my property. There's no shade on my property. It's on the side of a hill and I overlook a huge valley. Beautiful. But it causes me a lot of grief in the summer. It causes this machine a lot of grief. So I put that in. I'm utilizing the 12 volts DC out, and I'm pulling air out of that motor to exit it out of here. So it's basically an air-cooled motor. It only helps, in my opinion. You don't want to do it, you disagree, understand, write comments, let me know. Let others know if there's things that I'm saying you don't agree with and why. We're here to learn. That's why I post this stuff, so that way people can learn from my mistakes. I don't break the machines. But I am going to get it wrapped up. I will show a finished product when I'm done. And that way you have every known mod that I know, besides bigger wheels, a bigger handle, bigger gas tank, things like that. But I'm talking what I'm going to say performance mods, in my opinion, for this machine. Alright, so the Predator's back together. You're going to see this has been reversed upside down. I now have a new on and off switch. Up is on and down is off. When I want to start this, I turn it to the up position. Go to run to get the choke turned on, the gas flowing, start it, put it back to run. When I am done using the generator for the weekend, I will come here, hit the off button or dial, turn it off, leave this switch in the run position, on, up, and what that'll do is starve the carburetor of gas. It'll clean the bowl out. The generator will eventually quit. Now, in the event that this is running and something goes wrong, smoke comes out of the generator, shit like that, something, I don't know, you can come by, hit that off button, it grounds it out, drops the coil of the spark, and shuts the machine down relatively quick, just as if we had hit the off button. The other thing that I had talked about is I added a external fan. That is a radiator fan. It is in a pool mode, so it is drawing air from that cavity and pushing it out, not pushing it in, getting rainwater in. The Predator is naturally designed to draw air from the bottom and cause it to cool the machine down, so I'm just accelerating that process. When you do that, you will have to cut a hole in there and drill it in. Just get a size, I think it's like a 13, 14, 15 inch something off eBay, cheap, doesn't have to be anything much. Make sure you put a fuse in there. What I was talking about when I run that fan, since it is designed for a car, 12 volts DC, I have this little plug here, looks kind of slanted. I plug that in, that gives me 12 volts. Now I've created a pretty decently heavy gauge wire with these little XT60 connectors, I believe they call it. They're used for model truck or RC model cars, things like that. That allows me to hook in my fan on the side. I also created one that reverses polarity if I want to change the fan for whatever reason. But I have two of these outputs. You see one here plugs into the fan, and the other that has the ability to charge a 12 volt battery. I do have a quad runner at the property, and every now and then a 12 volt battery needs to be charged, and this thing will put out about 8 amps total, so it's pretty relatively fast charge. But I have another one of these jumpers made up with this little connector, XT60 I think, or something like that. I don't know if it says it on the side. You'll figure it out, search for it. Here you go, XT60. But I have a jumper at the cabin or the property that has this connector on it as well, and it has battery leads on it, or the clamp, so I could just put it onto a battery or my motorcycle or quad runner, I'm sorry. I also have one of these that has this connector on it, and then it has a standard plug like a trickle charger, so I can plug it directly into my quad and not have to do anything by opening the battery. So that is the unit. It is fully modified. You're going to see some damage here. Yes, it's dirty as heck. This unit took a spill before I even started it, to be quite honest, out of the back of a truck. It totally sucked because it's a brand new unit, and it sustained some damage. I'm putting another clip on this side to hold this in since I got it here. I'll clean it up, but it has been fully modified with the exception of the remote start, because I am waiting for the remote start to come in to where I can control the ESC. Here's the back, kind of dark back here, but you can see the flame arrestor has been removed. When I get to the property, I will put a cover on this, the same thing that they use for, what do you call those? Gutters. Oh yeah, gutters, to keep the leaves out, because it's a lot bigger and it'll just keep rodents from getting in there, causing me grief. It's not so much you can't burn a rodent up, but if they get in there making a nest, that's going to be problematic. So that is the unit. It is done. Nothing to see on this side here. With the pull start, that's all you see there. So modified, and if any questions, leave comments. Hopefully I'll be able to answer them for you. But yeah, there's my little 12 volt DC switch. It is hardwired into there, and now this thing no longer has the ability to physically turn the machine off, with the exception of the gas. So good luck. If you have any questions, let me know. So this is the igniter that I took out. You can see it's a little dirty. Most of these people say it's got oil on it, but if you look down in there, come on, focus, baby. You're going to see oil down in there, and that's off of that oil low switch, and it just drained inside that plug and wreaked havoc because it grounded out or cross-connected these pins and eventually blew this unit. So hopefully you can save yours in time, mount it up there where I did on the starter, and give a drip line for the oil low wire, and you won't have to buy one of these $60, $70 parts, depending on where you get it at.